Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Woodburn Accountants and Advisors China webinar series on e-commerce in China. This is a 5-day, 5-part webinar series where we are trying to cover all aspects pertinent to our expertise on e-commerce in China. Yesterday, we reflected on brand protection on e-commerce platforms, and I have just received a follow-up question from yesterday's presentation that I do want to highlight here because it might be something that you're all maybe have already researched or you're already thinking about. So Jack, I appreciate you asking this. So the question is it good, acceptable, or safe to apply for our trademark to do business in China via the World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, rather than applying directly in China? So Jack, this is actually a standard question I actually normally put when people don't ask me questions for my webinars. So if you guys have ever heard of the Madrid Protocol, which is part of WIPO, the Madrid Protocol is a select group of jurisdictions and countries around the globe where it allows you to file your trademark or your brand in one application with a multiple amount of jurisdictions. So this saves cost, and it does save on not necessarily time because you still have to go through the local jurisdiction procedures, but it just allows you to do one application versus a multitude of applications in separate jurisdictions. Now, that's the pro, okay? That's the advantage. You'd be saving costs and you'd be able to do one application at once in multiple jurisdictions. Disadvantage. The disadvantage is that it is not as direct as when you are applying directly with the China Trademark Office, okay? So if there ever becomes a requirement for going to court because you've got a IP hijacker or squatter, going through WIPO versus going direct with the CTMO, you're always going to get better results having applied directly with the China Trademark Office, okay? Obviously, that means if you're entering multitude of jurisdictions, anyone who is in each jurisdiction is going to tell you you're going to have a better success rate in terms of going to court or arbitration if you have done a direct application in that jurisdiction than if you have filed with the Madrid Protocol or under WIPO. Again, you know, it's more advisable to consult with an IP lawyer if you're going through WIPO versus going with a corporate service provider that will go direct in each jurisdiction. Because the lawyer should then back you up in case there is any arbitration situation occurring in that one jurisdiction that you might have issues in. So Jack, I hope that I answered your question on that. I love when people interact. So if you guys have more questions out there regarding yesterday's presentation, brand protection on e-commerce platforms, or if you got questions about today's presentation. So like I said earlier, many of you in your registration forms added questions. I haven't taken those questions out because some of them just are not my expertise. So if you do have questions and you remember those, add them in. If they're not pertaining to my expertise, I will tell you, and I'll refer you on to somebody who could answer those. So start typing away, interact with me. That would be absolutely fabulous. Yesterday, we had a fantastic Q&A session. So today you've joined us for part 2. Again, a lot of new names that I didn't see in yesterday's presentation. So as is typical with all of my webinars, I just like to know who you are. I'm going to start off with the A's. If there's Alan, Ali, Andrea, Archie, you guys are new names for me. I'd love to get to know who you are. Claudia, don't know you. Damon, Elena, I know you. So if I haven't seen you before, or you haven't joined our webinars, or you've never interacted with me, I apologize for picking your names out, but I went from the top of the list down. Let me know who you are, okay? Are you a newbie? Are you a startup? Are you an experienced China hand? Are you a mixture of one of those? Let me know. It always helps me to direct the presentation. Newbies are usually those that are evaluating opportunities in China. Startups are those of you that have started transacting in China or have an entity in China. You've been doing that for maybe 1, 3, 5 years. And those of you that experience China hands, you've probably been doing business there for over 10 years. And you're just on to learn a little bit more and certain tips about how to do business. Please, please, please interact. Nobody has been typing. Oh, Alan has. Thank you, Alan. You're a newbie. Fantastic. Love that you're exploring new opportunities, and I hope today I'll be able to answer your questions on e-commerce. So please do interact. It really does help me to gear today's presentation. All right. How the webinar works. Okay, so first of all, I just want to highlight one thing. I've been getting a lot of mail failures, email responses from emails I've been sending out reminding about today's time and reminding people about or giving people yesterday's webinar presentations. If you haven't received the email, it's most likely because you have a wrong email address that you sent me. Please, when you are registering, put in your correct email. That is the function that is most critical. I also had people yesterday telling me that they weren't getting their unique URLs to enter the webinar. It's probably because you typed in a wrong email address. So I hope that all of these things are being fixed up. Whenever you're registering for a webinar, the email is the most critical thing. Make sure you're using the right spellings. Technical side, you guys are on a GoToWebinar platform. I don't own GoToWebinar. So if you run into difficulties as I'm presenting, I don't have any staff with me doing this. If I'm presenting, I can't help you. Okay, I've got to keep going with the presentation. So if you run into difficulties, you can't log in, you get kicked off, apologies for that up front. Try to get back in. Worst case scenario, you're going to get the recording link and a copy of the presentation later on. All right. If I get into trouble, which might very well be because my husband's at home with me working, and we also have a lack of bandwidth, and if the two of us with our laptops, it always gets a bit complicated. So if I get kicked off, please be patient. I will be coming back on. It takes usually about 30 seconds to 60 seconds for me to reboot. Don't leave. I'll be coming on. I'll be finishing today's presentation. Last but not least, please, please, please interact. Okay, I've been seeing now a lot of people messaging in from Ali, from Cece, from Robin, from Paresh. Please, please, please interact. Okay, this is the perfect way for me to get to know you and be able to answer your questions. We will have a Q&A. I will be staying on until all questions are answered. Okay, so make sure you stay on the line, and I will go through every question and every comment. There is a lot of content here today. I have only actually put half of it on here because it would have taken up too many slides. This is part one. So one slide is part one. We also have a part two, all about e-commerce. We're going to focus first on cross-border because I think that is the hottest topic for people here today, which basically means that you won't be setting up an entity in China and you'll be doing everything from your home jurisdiction. But I also will be providing info in part two, where you may be considering to formulate structures on the ground in Asia to facilitate your e-commerce business. Okay. So why am I able to help you? Let me just move this questions box away so I can see the screen. Why am I able to help you? Well, first of all, my name is Christina Kohler-Coluccia. I'm the head of business advisory at Woodburn Accountants and Advisors. Again, because of bandwidth, I'm not using the webcam. So just to put a picture to the voice, this is me. I have been predominantly working for 17 years, just hit my anniversary in August, 17 years on inbound investment to China. So I've been helping foreign investors with their market entry strategies, formulating strategies, implementing those strategies, and then hoping that at some point focus is brought to growth and how to grow further in the Chinese market. My expertise is in the administrative aspects, so corporate services and corporate compliance. Many questions that came in for today's presentation was about marketing. I'm not a marketeer. I know how to market my business, but I'm not a marketing expert for China. So if your question is around marketing, what are the best platforms? These are all questions that I actually don't have a marketing expert on this webinar series, and I apologize that because that would have given a fuller picture of e-commerce. But I would be happy to refer you on if you want to talk to someone on that, okay? I'm a speaker, I'm an author, and I'm also the creator of the China Roadmap Method, where we have a webinar on October 13th after the October holiday, all about putting yourselves on the right path to success for China. My roadmap methodology is all about 9 superpowers that you've got to obtain and hitting 3 major milestones to make sure that you eliminate as many obstacles as possible on your journey. Okay, and that you've got all the bullet points and homework points to complete, which usually are the pain points because it's all administrative, to make sure that you're running successfully and that your focus can stay on growth. And if you're interested in that, the link is here. It's also on our website, woodburnglobal.com/events. And again, you'll get a copy of all of this later on. So if you're interested in that, please do sign up, okay? I will also be providing at the end of today's presentation some ways of reaching out to me if you just want to have a direct chat. All right, so let's start. And the big question that I'm sure everybody today has is, how do I begin, right? That's probably why you're on here, is to learn about the e-commerce business models available and how do I begin. So when people are generally in the market research stage, I see one of 2 things. One, they want to have clarity on the next steps so they can move fast once they've done their research. What's the missing is really the clarity of everything. Then I have another group of people who have a plan, they have clarity, but they need help for the implementation, to give confidence, to give peace of mind, to know that they're going in the right direction. Now, the whole point of today's webinar and this week's webinar series is to give you all clarity. It's to give you homework pieces, action plans on what to do next, and to provide you with a network of individuals, not just myself, but also people from the Alanders group, who's going to talk about the logistical and warehousing side, talking to a recruitment agent who's going to help you understand, how to find people who can help you with e-commerce because it is still relatively new. And then obviously the last piece missing is to find marketeers, whether you want to do that in-house or outsourced, where again, if you have questions on that, I can help you. So how do you begin, right? So in today's presentation, I'm going to be starting off with cross-border e-commerce in China, okay? So what I want to highlight here is just to let you know that cross-border e-commerce is still a very new and fresh concept in China. It was initially launched in 2014, just 6 years ago. It's not a long period of time, okay? Which is why you're finding companies like the Alanders Group to provide full service solutions for you, because it is still relatively new and they're in China and they know how to go about in terms of the supply chain, all right? There have been updates on the cross-border e-commerce regulations as of Jan 1, 2019. So again, it's very important to understand what those regulations state, how it would involve you, and what you need to know about all of this, okay? So part 1, we're going to be looking at e-commerce from home, which is ultimately the cross-border function. And I just wanted to highlight here that although you do it from home, it does not mean you do it by yourself. You will need to develop an ecosystem of companies and individuals that help you to formulate this cross-border e-commerce strategy. And that is everything from marketing agencies, public relations agencies, e-commerce providers, logistics providers. You may even want to consolidate with distributors, licensees, sales agents, franchisees, etc. Okay, that is potentially your ecosystem. Now, very interestingly enough, after yesterday's webinar presentation, I got on the phone with a company interested in importing beverage items into China. And it just so happens this was really yesterday. So I want to tell you a little bit what I was advising him in today's current situation, because there are 2 ways of selling into China. One is the e-commerce model, right? Doing cross-border e-commerce or domestic e-commerce, depending on where your production is. And the second is utilizing third parties like distributors, licensees, to do the full service scope for you. Everything from old-fashioned distribution, wholesale distribution, retail distribution, wholesale distribution, to also e-commerce. Now, the issue, if you are a newbie in China, is that you might not yet have your ecosystem of distribution contacts, distributor contacts, right? And with COVID and the lack of availability to travel into China, it's not so easy to develop relationships with distributors without actually having sat around a table, seeing them face to face. You know, as I was explaining to this individual yesterday, when you go on a trip to China and you're meeting with distributors, most likely they will want to take you on a tour of, I don't know, if you're selling food and beverage items, to supermarkets, to hotels, there was another, to restaurants, in order to get a full understanding of what are the potentials, what's in the supermarkets, what is being sold in the hotels, are they interested in your brand, are they interested to do this type of field trip, basically, to get an understanding. Now, in today's time, we can't do that. And it'll be very long before you can develop those relationships and do proper field study trips yourself into China to understand how things look, okay? And doing that, obviously, with distributors. So as a first step, during COVID times, potentially, the strategy might just be e-commerce and outsourcing all of the functions to test the market, and eventually then expanding into actual distribution with distributors or licensees or whomever, okay? This was just something that came up yesterday in yesterday's conversation, and I thought it was really interesting to then add it on as a component as a case study, just that it was less than 24 hours ago. So the only thing that I want to highlight in terms of signing up with partners, right, whether it's marketing agencies, e-commerce providers, logistics providers, distributors, whomever, is that you will want to do your due diligence, okay? Being that you can't travel to China yet, you still want to be able to do some form of due diligence, some type of background check on these partners to make sure that you have found the right fit for you, okay? We all know in China that scams are popular. We know there's a lack of transparency. We know there are language barriers, okay? So there is no harm in just doing your own due diligence, doing your own background check, asking for client references to actually understand if that partner is the right fit for you. One thing that you can do from your desktop without having to actually pay for a background check is that you can ask these partners for a copy of their business licenses, get, you know, copies of their tax certificates, IP registrations, just to understand, you know, are they real, right? Now, some companies may not be willing to provide you these things, saying that it's confidential. Usually business licenses, you know, can be found online. The content at least can be found on the various government platforms or websites. So in theory, that they should at least provide you a copy of the business license. But I just want to highlight that to you all, that this is something you could do from your own desk to vet your partners. These are other tips in terms of how to do your own due diligence, right? It's conducting general online searches. Please don't use Google, use Bing, because, you know, if it's a Chinese partner, they're going to, you know, probably have a .cn domain name, which will come up in Chinese search engines. Call phone lines, ask for references, talk to third parties, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Again, you're going to get a copy of this presentation, so you'll be able to look at this in your own time. But this is just a way for you to do your own due diligence on these partners, because if you are doing cross-border e-commerce, you have to rely on partners to help you develop that supply chain. So it is just very important to do that internal check before you sign off on contracts. The next question, probably that is critical for everyone, is can my product be shipped to China utilizing the cross-border e-commerce method? Okay. Now, specifically, you might have all heard in general in China, there's something called the negative list. The negative list pertains to a list of products that are not permitted to enter China. They're prohibited or they are restricted, and whereby you will need to utilize Chinese partners to help you to bring them in, okay? When you're looking specifically at cross-border e-commerce, there is something which is called the positive list that pertains only to cross-border e-commerce, okay? Now, this positive list was released in April 2016, and it included at that time about 1,142 commodity categories. Then in April 15th, 2016, so actually just 1 week later, another 151 categories were added. And in 2018, the list was also then updated, and now there's 1,321 categories that can be imported, okay? Now, the advantage, if your product is on that positive list, is that your product will enjoy a preferential tax rate as long as the transactional value does not exceed 5,000 RMB for the individual who's purchasing it, or 26,000 RMB per year for the individual that is purchasing it, okay? And then you can also import the products that are in the positive list either from the direct shipping model or the bonded zone model that I will be going through today, and that also Kevin Rogers from the Landers Group will also be touching on tomorrow, okay? So the first thing that you've got to do is really check, is your product in the positive list, okay? Now, if you guys are in cosmetic sector or baby formulas, the positive list required special registration for these types of products. Currently, there is no guideline in regards to any special licenses that have to be applied for. It's been postponed numerous times. And as of 2019, and obviously during 2020 with COVID, nothing has happened. It's been indefinitely postponed. So for now, everything is fine with cosmetics and baby formulas coming in, okay? Now, the big question obviously comes to, what if my product is not on the positive list? Don't worry, you can still import your products into China, okay, through the direct shipping model. The only downside is that you won't have those beneficial tax regimes available to be able to import, but you can still import, okay? You would just have to go through the direct shipping model in that regard. What I wanted to highlight here was the categories of products that are purchased by cross-border e-commerce shoppers on cross-border e-commerce platforms. So generally speaking, you've got the Chinese millennials that are purchasing, and they've got the purchasing power. And I've listed the top 5 categories. So cosmetics and care, baby products, food and beverage, fashion, as well as jewelry. Okay, so very much consumer related. And ultimately, you know, the Chinese millennials are looking for good quality products and coming from name brands. All right, so those are the top 5 categories. Again, I'm not a marketeer. This is just stats that I found online, and I'm sure you'll find other stats online. That leads me to one big tip. When you're doing your own research and you're Googling things and whatnot, do me a favor, please don't read anything that was published prior to, we're now September 2020, prior to September 2019, okay? Regulations in the e-commerce sector are updated continuously. Reading outdated information is just going to confuse you. So when you are doing your own research about your own sector, your own products, etc., please don't read anything past September 2019. Makes no sense. You will have contradicting information because there are consistently changes occurring in the e-commerce market. All right, so let's look at the types of shipping models. And the first one that we're going to look at is the direct shipping model. So I grabbed these beautiful trade flows from the Fung Business Intelligence Group because I didn't want to have to recreate these again. And I thought what they did was fantastic. So these models are basically highlighting what you have to do overseas and what then happens when it arrives in China, okay? So you have the direct mail modeling, direct mail model, and then you also have direct mail plus overseas warehouse model that I want to touch on today, okay? Direct mail model is very simple to understand. You have an international logistics company that is going to take the package, is going to handle the shipping, is going to handle the customs supervision and customs clearance, and we'll be doing the domestic delivery as well. The direct mail and overseas warehouse model, if you look at the orange points 4, 5, 6 in the model on the right-hand side, this is basically certain platforms, e-commerce platforms, like JD.com, VIP, VIP.com, NetEase, Koala, Xiaohongshu, and a couple of others. What they have done is they have actually established warehouses overseas where you can then ship the product directly to that warehouse, and the platform takes over the responsibility to then handle the logistics directly into China. Okay, so I'm going to reiterate that in case there was a bit of confusion. Direct mail model basically means that you've got an international logistics provider. So for example, the Alanders Group tomorrow will be highlighting this. They take on the package, you send it to them, or they pick it up from you. They handle everything at that point, including customs clearance into China and product arriving in China and directly to the customer. Direct mail and overseas warehouse model means that you are working with your e-commerce platform to bring the packaging to the overseas warehouse as a parcel, and the e-commerce platform takes responsibility at that point, does consolidated shipments from that warehouse, so not just yours, but multitude of customers or suppliers' products, brings it into China as a bulk shipment, and then separates it and delivers it directly to customers. So you got 2 of those options that are available to you, okay? With the direct shipping model, it's basically kind of like an EMS model, right? So either you have, mostly it's air freight, right? Because it's a personal package. So you can also use companies like DHL, FedEx, etc. And you ship your products directly from overseas. There's a clear distinction and benefit with the direct shipping model is that packages are not necessarily checked or taxed upon arrival. It is a random check that customs does. So it could be that your customer does not have to pay customs duty or any form of tax, or it could be that they do have to pay, okay? VAT will be passed on to the end customer at the local post office before the package can be collected and picked up. But in terms of customs duty, that's another issue where, again, it may or may not be subject to payment, okay? It's basically doing spot checks. So the benefits of the direct shipping model are that it's randomly checked, taxes only apply occasionally except for VAT, because VAT the customer has to pay upon importation. You don't have stock in China, right? So it's just individual purchases. Tax exemption is available, and VAT tax exemption is available if the amount is under 50 RMB, and there is no CIQ clearance, which is basically a customs clearance that's done in China. But clearly, there are disadvantages, otherwise there wouldn't be so many options available. The disadvantages of this personal parcel route is the fact that you've got higher costs for the individual shipment of the packages, and you've also got shipping lead times that can take between 7 and 30 days, okay? Now, most Chinese millennials are very happy with direct shipping as it reduces the risk of counterfeit products, and they know they're gonna get the real thing, okay? But, you know, some people want the product immediately. They don't want to have to wait 1 month for the product to arrive. So in this regard, this is where the disadvantage may lie, where they'll find a local provider who can ship in a shorter period of time. So even though shipping time needs, you know, it plays a huge role in the whole e-commerce model, this is a great starting point. I mean, direct shipping model, this is a fantastic starting point for all of you. And again, join in tomorrow's conversation with Kevin from the Alanders Group, because they can handle the full outsourcing function for you and work with a partner, an e-commerce provider on the ground to open the platforms and handle that whole supply chain from overseas to end customer in China. But the one thing that I want to highlight here is that if your volume and your value goes up, then the cost of the shipping will increase, The delay time might put people off. So you will have to look for a better long-term solution to organize everything, okay? So one of those solutions could be, and I'll go back to that diagram, is to work with the e-commerce platforms directly and utilize their warehousing facilities overseas to stock inventory, okay? Alternatively, you can then use the bonded zone model where you can also stock inventory locally in China, okay? In regards to the direct shipping model, we want you guys to be aware of the VAT rates that are applicable. So here are the rates that are applicable depending on the products that you're importing. So generally, in terms of all those 5 top categories, you're looking at a 25% tax rate, okay? Anything that is a consumption product, cosmetics, food and beverage items, etc., you're looking at a 50% rate. Okay. So conclusion of the direct shipping model is that it is not a scalable option, but it is a fantastic way to test the market. And this is also why I'm highlighting it here, because in COVID times, as you can't travel into China, this is a great option for you to start your China business utilizing the direct shipping model, where yes, you might have a larger cost in terms of shipping. It'll be parcel by parcel. There might be delays in time frame, but it is a great way for you to test the market and see what happens. You just have to make sure you get on the right platforms. All right. Now, the second type of shipping model, when you're looking at the cross-border e-commerce sector, is the bonded warehouse. Okay. So when you're looking at the bonded area import model, which is the diagram on the left, you will see that in overseas, so where you are, you only have to handle point 1 and point 2, which basically means you're utilizing an international freight forwarder, international logistics company to ship a bulk amount of product into China. What the logistics provider will do is that they will clear customs. The products will be stored in their warehouse. And as a customer makes an order online, they're going to be handling the warehouse management system to then do the sorting, the packaging, and the direct delivery to the customer. Okay, is that kind of clear for everyone? Now, here's another alternative for bonded area import, which I also want to highlight because there are some e-commerce platforms that have been doing it. Kawala.com, for example, has been doing it since 2008, where they have actually opened up an offline store, an actual retail store in Hangzhou. And what happens is that your international freight forwarder handles, again, the bulk shipment. They handle the customs clearance. The products are stored in a bonded warehouse. They are then shipped to this offline store that is owned by the e-commerce platform. And customers have the ability to go to these shops in person to make purchases, okay? So they go in there, they have to show their ID, they have to pay VAT and whatnot, but they do it direct. It's like going basically to a store in the bonded warehouse area to do your purchasing of overseas imported items. So option 1 is just a direct bonded where your international freight forwarder or logistics company handles everything and you've got individual orders. The other one is that you use the option of the e-commerce platform's own offline shop to also then sell. So it can be a combination of both of those things. So what are the requirements, okay? The requirements are that your freight forwarder or logistics company that you're going to be utilizing has warehousing facilities in the free trade zone. So for example, the Alanders Group, who's talking tomorrow, they have that ability. They have warehouses in the free trade zone. It also, what it basically means once the goods arrive is that you can store and clear the goods without the necessity of registering or filing them with the authorities, which is a clear advantage because they come straight in. It's basically moving freely in, okay? And no taxes are paid. Okay, duties are only paid before customs clearance, which means there has already been a sale that has been made or an order that has been made. Okay, and obviously the tax rates in the bonded zone, it's much, much lower compared to traditional imports. And in addition to that, there is the advantage of a 30% discount on import rates as well if you're going through the bonded zone. So again, depending on the volume and the value of your business, direct shipping might be an advantage for you now. But as your business scales up, the bonded warehouse might be your second step, because you will leave a certain amount of inventory in this bonded free trade zone. And as orders come in, you know, it's immediate delivery. So here, you're basically looking at a lead time of between 2 to 4 days because you've got inventory on the ground in China. Whereas with a direct shipping model, you're looking at between 7 and 30 days, okay? The bonded zone has the disadvantage that it does have to go through a customs clearance process because you're bringing in a bulk shipment. It's not parcel to parcel where they do spot checks. Here, it's bringing in a full shipment. You might be bringing in a couple of pallets or even a 20-foot container to keep as inventory stock in the bonded zone, and it has to go through a customs clearance process, right? It makes sense, it's logical, all right? So again, using the direct shipping model at a start is preferred because, you know, there might not be these customs clearance aspects. Now, I've added it in here. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I think a lot of you are not financial people, but these are the tax rates that occur or are incurred when you import products into the bonded warehouse, okay? I'm just going to leave that there. You guys can take a look at it in more detail, and if you do have questions, feel free to ask me, okay? But to explain it on here will take quite a bit of time. And as we have a lot of content, I don't want to miss out on people having to leave. In terms of cross-border trade and Forex, again, when you're working with a solutions provider like the Alanders Group, they're going to explain to you how payment is done, right? So options are Alipay cross-border or WeChat payment cross-border, where basically the system is that Chinese user will pay in renminbi, Alibaba or Tencent will handle the currency conversion with their partner bank, there will be a commission that's charged, and the payment amount will then be sent to the overseas account, okay? And then a transfer will be made to the merchant's account once the settlement amount is reached, okay? So this is the option in terms of actual payment that you will receive in the cross-border system. For you to understand the customs clearance procedures, and again, you know, tomorrow this will be repetitive information, but I think it's always good to hear it more than once. When you're going into the bonded zone and you have to go through the customs clearance procedures, okay, the importer, who will be your freight forwarder, they're going to have to handle all of the formalities. So they have to do a customs registration, they have to do a commodity inspection, then there's the declaration, a submission of a whole lot of documents. There might be an examination on the documents together with the goods. There will be the payment of taxes and other related fees. Then they will release the goods, and then there's the foreign exchange control, okay? So as I've highlighted on this slide, for you to start your business, as I said, you know, the biggest question people have is, how can I begin, right? Now, you might have gotten so overwhelmed by the last few slides that I have provided to you and all the options that are available to you. One thing I want to highlight is, don't get overwhelmed. If your focus is to grab that opportunity and use it as a test of the market, let's say you have the goal and strategy to test the market for 1 year, use the option of this cross-border e-commerce as a testing platform where you can literally outsource everything. You get an order, whether it's individual orders or bulk order, depending on the model that you're utilizing, and you use then a third-party logistics provider who has then a good relationship with an e-commerce provider to manage everything for you, all right? Just make sure your brand and your trademarks are registered ahead of time. You won't be able to start any of this without getting your brand protected first, because the platforms will want to see who is the owner of that brand and that trademark. But it is a perfect way for you to outsource. It's not overwhelming when you have the ability to outsource everything. And it is a fantastic way for you to do a 1-year test of the e-commerce market in China. Now, I just want to highlight one thing here. Again, I'm not a marketeer, but if you want companies to be attracted to the e-commerce platform and to know about your brand, you're going to have a marketing strategy attached to all of this. Right now, we're looking at the whole supply chain, but sometimes people forget, well, everyone in China knows my brand. No, they don't, not necessarily, not if you don't market locally. So don't forget to have that marketing campaign set up that people become aware of you. So you're gonna have to utilize a third-party provider, and maybe even the e-commerce provider can offer that full solution of doing marketing, getting your brand known, so that you have the ability to increase sales through this cross-border e-commerce methodology, okay? But this is a perfect way for you to begin and to kick off your China journey. Now, the benefits of the Jan 1, 2019 regulations, again, you know, I did make the statement that you shouldn't look at content prior to September 2019, but there have been no updates since. So I just want to highlight some of the differences, because if you are getting confused, this will be why you're confused. So basically, the pre-importation registration waiver is that in the new CBEC regulations, it indefinitely extends the waiver of pre-importation registration on specified categories of products like cosmetics, infant milk, health food, medical devices. It was originally set up to expire on the 31st of December 2018, but then it was postponed, it was delayed, and now with COVID, there is no sign that there has to be a pre-importation registration. So if you are in that sector or field, you're free to go. In terms of the value limit relaxation, basically the value limit for each shipment of goods under the CBE program was increased from 2,000 RMB to 5,000 RMB per shipment, and the annual quota from 20,000 RMB to 26,000 RMB. What does this mean? It means that the consumer in China has the ability to purchase product up to 5,000 RMB per shipment and a total amount of 26,000 RMB annually, okay? That is their threshold of cross-border e-commerce purchases, okay? So that is a tip for you to understand. It doesn't sound like a very high amount, but calculate all the Chinese millennials, do that research, understand the purchasing power. And obviously, if you are in the top 5 category of products, this could be very interesting, okay? So they have more spending power now than they did prior to Jan 1, 2019. In terms of tariff exemptions and tax reductions, so under the current tax policy under which customs duties are exempted and import VAT and consumption taxes are collected, there's a 30% discount for the products that are imported through the cross-border e-commerce channel, okay? Expanded positive lists, I explained earlier, there is a expansion of products in the positive list. So take a look to see whether your product is in the positive list, all right? In terms of free trade zone distribution centers, under the new regulations, it continues to allow foreigners to stockpile and have inventory in the designated free trade zones in China, from where you can fulfill customers' orders directly and deliver directly to the customers. So it obviously gives a greater control and immediate delivery time frame for people to purchase your product. And the last point, safe harbor against retaliatory tariffs. So this basically highlights if you are American and you are in the US and you are looking to import product from the US into China, there are no tariff regulations or restrictions if you're doing cross-border e-commerce, only if you're doing wholesale trade. So keep that in mind. There won't be a lot of Americans on right now because I know they'll all be sleeping. But if you are listening to this recording and you are American, you're in the US and you want to go into the cross-border sector, just note there are no tariff restrictions if you're importing utilizing the cross-border e-commerce model. So again, fantastic for you to start off your business in China. So what should be the strategy for overseas retailers if they're looking to go through the cross-border e-commerce model? All right, whether it is direct shipping or whether it is through the bonded zone. You need to carefully design your supply chain structure. Okay, you have to make sure it is tax efficient. You have to make sure it makes sense. Questions you should be asking yourself are, what is the volume of business today? What is the value of business? And then evaluating that consistently, either monthly or quarterly, to review if the volume and the value is increasing. Do not forget to add marketing into all of this design, because without the marketing and without the brand recognition, people won't go to your shop on the various e-commerce platforms to purchase. So you can set up a fantastic supply chain model, but in the end, because nobody knows about your brand, nobody knows to go to your shop, you won't get sales. So this would have been a waste of time. The second, as I highlighted earlier, is do your due diligence on your business partners, whomever they may be, whether it's marketeers, logistics providers, e-commerce providers, distributors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Do a due diligence, vet them, ask for references, understand their abilities. Now, just so you know, I have in my time spoken to a variety of e-commerce providers who help you to set up the shops. They create marketing strategies for you or marketing campaigns for you. They handle the whole supply chain aspect together with logistics providers of your choice. I've heard mixed results, okay, from each of them. There are pros and cons. There is no firm where I will say they are the gem of China, okay? But I just want you to know there is a wide variety of providers that are available. And it's up to you to evaluate if they are the right fit for you, whether you agree with the marketing strategy that they've come up with, whether you agree with the e-commerce platforms that they recommend for you to utilize and to set up shops in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you've got to make that distinction. You've got to make that research on your own, and you've got to do your due diligence on that. The next is obviously having in place contract terms to understand what are the responsibilities and risks and the indemnities that there are with the various parties that you're collaborating with. Obviously, your goal is to limit your responsibility and risk and your indemnities, okay, particularly as you're not going to be doing very much in all of this except putting the package together, okay, or putting the pallets together or putting the container together, okay? You are reliant on all of the operators in the supply chain to fulfill their responsibilities. So you've got to understand what everyone's responsibility is, what are the risks, what are the indemnities. And point 4 is so critical. So this is the problem for me with cross-border e-commerce, is that people become complacent, okay, because they don't do very much. They make the assumption they've developed a supply chain where they don't have to do anything unless they get an email or phone call saying that there hasn't been an order placed, and they then have to get their act together to get the package done. If you don't do repeated and continuous updates on just statistical data, what's the volume of the business, what's the value of the business that's being generated, having continuous discussions with your providers in terms of how you can lower the cost. That should be everyone's goal, is that eventually they want to lower the cost over time as value and volume increases. If you get complacent, if you get lazy, your business in China will not go anywhere, okay? You can create this fantastic cross-border e-commerce model where you really don't have to do anything, but if you don't do your follow-up, it won't go anywhere, okay? I'm pressuring you now, because this is the failure of a lot of companies who after a year, only after a year, after 12 months will say, why have I got no results? Well, have you been following up on marketing campaigns? Have you agreed with strategies? Are they building up content that is correct, that follows your ethos and philosophy? Have you talked to your e-commerce provider and looked at the stats that they are actually providing to you, but you're not looking at them? You're not having calls with them to discuss them? Are you talking to your logistics provider to discuss those things? If you don't do that, this is all pointless, okay? You've got to create and monitor what is happening. So you do need to create an internal compliance program and understand where this is going, okay? You can't make any decisions for the growth of your business in China without monitoring the system, all right? Now, obviously, if you are monitoring the system, if you're controlling the system, and cross fingers, business is increasing, volume and value is increasing, then you've got to start thinking about trigger points that will make you move forward in the Chinese market. And that is everything from volume of business, value of business, your strategy direction. Do you want to formulate new sales channel strategies? Are you being asked to issue FAPYAOs? Do you need to have a showroom on the ground? Do you need to have local representation? Is the marketing campaign good enough, or do you need to start creating your own marketing campaigns with an in-house team? It's a lot about doing things in-house. So moving from a completely outsourced structure to bringing things slowly by slowly, step by step in-house, that you're doing it yourself at some point. That should be everyone's ultimate goal, that at some point they have the ability to do things in-house and take control of all functions of the supply chain, okay? And mind you, that could be in 1 year, it could be in 10 years, but you should always have these trigger points in mind whenever you're doing your annual business plan and your strategy development, to analyze these trigger points and these questions. And obviously, there are a lot of advantages of having your own structure in China, okay? It shows commitment, brand image, control. You have the ability to invoice with the local FAPYAO system yourself. You have control over the e-commerce platforms, all of these types of things, okay? So this now leads me to part 2 of today's presentation, because like I said, when I was talking to this guy yesterday, and we were just brainstorming back and forth about what is the right strategy to take right now, it really became clear that e-commerce, because of the travel restrictions that there are, makes a lot of sense. This cross-border e-commerce model is a fantastic way to start it all off, especially with COVID restricting you to travel to go into China, okay? You can do a lot of these outsourced functions. It will save you a lot of time and resources, and it just helps you to get the green button and go, okay? Like I said earlier, how do I begin? Fantastic way to begin. But eventually, you might want to take this a step further. So in part 2 of today's presentation, we're going to be looking at how to create your distribution, your e-commerce, and your retail structure in China, because that might be then step 2, step 3 in your whole China strategy program. Okay, so in order to explain this, and because the majority of the attendees are from the UK, or at least the majority of the registrants were from the UK, I have come up with a fake company. I will be going into a live case study later on, but I just created for these purposes a fake case study. So this is the journey of, this is potentially a distribution journey, okay? So I'm trying to make it as real as is possible, all right? So it's a family business founded in the UK in 1970, really strong ties, family business. They're specialized in the premium and healthcare products sector. They've got very strong brand identity. Customers are in the UK, EU, and North America. And obviously the trend now, particularly with COVID, is that customers are inquiring to purchase their products, even though there's very little marketing that is going on there, okay? Now here, this point is very critical because this happens actually to a lot of people. 70% of the production is in the UK. Could also be anywhere else outside of the UK. But there is 30% of the production that is outsourced to Chinese manufacturers. Because in any company that you're in, you will probably have a portion of your production, whether it's for parts, whatever it might be, that is in China, okay? You've got a head office in the UK, and because you've got this 30% of production outsourced to Chinese manufacturers, you might have a Hong Kong company which is managing the production that is occurring in Asia. That was the real reason behind creating that Hong Kong company. Now, some of you that are brand newbies, you might not even know about Hong Kong, okay? I'm gonna be talking a little bit to the old timers that have been doing business in Asia for a very long time and might have an arm of their business, their production predominantly in Asia, specifically in China, okay? Now, what is the strategy? Okay, and hopefully they've got a beautiful business plan or PowerPoint presentation to highlight this. I put it on one slide. So their strategy is that they know there's a high potential for their products. They want to have a progressive expansion strategy for Greater China and APAC. So keep that in mind, because again, this happens when you start brainstorming. Is China the only market you want to get into? Or are you thinking about other Asian regions as well? Okay. Obviously everyone's goal at the moment is to minimize the investment requirements because capital is tight, okay? And they want to optimize maintenance costs and tax efficiency in the structures, okay? So let's start off. I've created business models, okay? I'm starting with the basic based on what I've highlighted in the assumptions, okay? So you've got a company in the UK, headquarters are the factory, and currently they've got a Hong Kong subsidiary that has been predominantly used to handle the conversations and communication with the production facilities in China or in Asia. But now we're thinking about it from a selling perspective, okay? So from a selling perspective, you've got to identify the right partners, the right distributors, the right import agents, the right e-commerce providers, etc. Okay. Now, obviously, now is really difficult. You can't meet in person, you can't build trust, but hopefully over time and with the start of doing WeChat conversations or Zoom conversations, you can start these relationships already now. Okay. Just because you can't travel doesn't mean you can't have video conference calls and start talking. Okay, and start understanding the interests of these potential partners, okay? What you want to do with these potential partners is avoid any verbal agreements. You always want to have, with distributors, with import agents, with anybody, written agreements, which will protect your brand, define clearly the assignments for each party and the requirements for each party. Set KPIs for your distributors or your import agents, okay? Highlighted it yesterday, you've got to protect your trademark and any other intellectual property assets. You got to take control over that, okay? But what you could do, if you already have this Hong Kong company, you can utilize that Hong Kong company to sell to the distributors and the import agents, because you can do that in renminbi. Hong Kong cannot issue fapiaos, but you can do the transaction in renminbi. And you have the ability to also sell from Hong Kong to other APAC customers. Now, if you don't have a Hong Kong company today, this probably won't be the best solution for you, okay? But if you do have a Hong Kong company, you can certainly use it from, not from a production perspective, but from a selling perspective. Now, what many people have done in the past is that they have utilized Hong Kong to actually set up a representative office in China. Now, for me, a representative office is useless. I have added this slide here today because if you've done your own research, I'm sure rep office has popped up many times, and I want to add it here so that you have all the information at your fingertips. Representative offices really are useless. It's something I don't recommend at all, especially if you're planning on selling into China. I have only had a couple of clients set up representative offices because they are in the real estate sector and they're looking to find Chinese real estate buyers to buy property overseas. And it is just a marketing office. There is no invoicing, there is nothing. It's like a 2 to 3 person office maximum, okay? But I want to add it here because again, historically, this is what people did. Hong Kong still did all the sales, you know, it was all centralized through that. And rep office was just to have representation on the ground in China. Not the best business model, but I want you to be aware of it. Now I've kept the rep office in this next scenario so you can see it as an overall picture, but I would remove rep office from this to consolidate the whole picture. If you're selling into China, you will probably find that at some point, particularly if you're in the consumer sector, you will want to have your own retail shops and retail facilities, okay? It might be that you open 1 shop today and in the end you open 10 shops throughout China. In order to be able to have that ability and function, you will need to set up an entity in China to do that. and then each of the shops becomes a branch of that entity. Okay, so as you can see here, you've got Hong Kong. Hong Kong set up a wholly foreign-owned enterprise in China, and it then can do direct business in China. Now, if you don't have Hong Kong, I wouldn't even consider Hong Kong in this structure. There are no advantages unless you're thinking on a really long-term strategy for APAC. If China is your sole thought right now, you can go direct from the UK into China. Okay, you can eliminate the Hong Kong side of things. Okay, because you can still do business with APAC directly from your UK head office. Okay, but the whole idea of the China subsidiary is that you have full control over all functions related to distribution, wholesale distribution, retail, and eventually e-commerce. Okay. Now, I have also added this next slide because this is where recently I have gotten a lot of questions, which is how would you structure it if you want to get Chinese investment capital? Okay. So in that regard, again, I've added Hong Kong still here, but in that regard, you could set up a joint venture with a Chinese investor who then funds into that joint venture. That's what I've highlighted here on this slide. Alternatively, you could also have that Chinese investor invest into Hong Kong and have the joint venture in Hong Kong. But that depends if you have Hong Kong already or not, and whether the Chinese investor has the ability to send funds to Hong Kong. Okay, but this is if you're looking for outside investment capital and you're looking for ways to bring that capital into a structure to build up and grow your business. These four scenarios that I've highlighted today are very, very, very generalistic, okay? It is for the purpose of this presentation to give you an idea of what it could look like, okay? When I brainstorm directly with companies, it may look very different from this, okay? Because it depends on what your goals are. It depends on what your board of directors have as criteria. For example, I've had clients who've been adamant about not getting Chinese investment, but adamant about getting overseas investment, which means then money should just be held in a holding, not directly in China. So a lot of things like this will come down to very specifics associated with your organization. But I wanted to add these four scenarios here to show you how you can grow your business step by step, how Hong Kong can still be used as an APAC tool, and what you can do if you want to do business directly in China, and what happens if you're looking for local Chinese investment and what type of structures you can set up. Okay, but again, if you want to have a brainstorming session about how to do it for yourself, please don't hesitate to reach out. Okay, so the big question comes down to, and again, I'm not a marketeer, but I've added it in here. How effective is it developing a China marketing, retail, and e-commerce strategy from home versus in China? Okay, and there's no right or wrong answer to this, but this is basically a homework piece for you. You basically need to take a piece of paper, draw a line in the middle, and on one side write in-house, and on the other side, write outsource. And when you are developing your strategy, what do you want to keep in-house? Do you want to keep the marketing strategies in-house? Do you want to have full control over the e-commerce platforms versus giving that control to somebody else? Asset brand protection. Hopefully you'll put that in the category of in-house and do those applications yourself. But do your homework. When you're developing these strategies and you've looked at all of these options, take this piece of paper, put a line in the middle, and say, what do you want to do in-house? What do you want to outsource? Look at the resources you have, the capabilities you have, and make that analysis. There's no right or wrong answer to that. But let me show you all of the structural options that exist, okay? What I showed you prior was just examples. But these are all the options that are available to you, okay? So one, you do it from home, doing it all by yourself. Okay, but just remember, it's very difficult to do it all by yourself. You will need third parties to assist you. So does that mean you use a distributor locally that handles your e-commerce needs as well as your distribution needs? Do you outsource the whole marketing and branding to an agency for e-commerce or even just distribution? Do you hire an individual, potentially a Chinese individual, in your home jurisdiction to be placed in your headquarters? Or do you send an individual from your home jurisdiction to China? Do you hire an individual via a local agent to be placed on the ground in China? These are all options. None of this shows you're committing to the market and setting up an entity, but these are ways that you can do the full outsourcing, but still have some control. Like hiring an individual, going through a recruitment process. That's why we've got Friday session for the recruitment agent, to hire individuals that have the Chinese e-commerce experience, which is new, started 2014. So it's a rare gem to find these people who have the ability to work solely for your organization and build up the business in China and be based on the ground in China. From a legal standpoint, if your volume of business and value of business increases, these are all the types of entities you can set up. Everything from rep offices to WOOFIes to FICEs to domestically owned enterprises to joint ventures. It's actually a whole nother webinar session just to explain all of these. But it gives you an understanding of what's available to you. There's so many structural options, okay? Fully outsourcing 50% to doing it all by yourself 100%, okay? And you've got to do your homework to understand what you want to do in-house, what you want to do, what you want to outsource. So I want to give you an up-to-date case study of a client of mine. They're a leather accessories brand out of the UK, family owned for 2 generations. They entered China about 6 to 7 years ago via a distributor, and they were super lucky finding this distributor. I can't even tell you. Why? Because it was a foreign distributor. So it was an American guy. He set up a distribution company in Tianjin, and he basically was helping a multitude of brands entering the Chinese market, okay? Now, my client, they registered their trademark, they registered their brand, so they had full control over this. They didn't license it to the distributor. There was no specific licensing agreement. It was just a good faith that they were providing the use of the trademark for marketing initiatives because the distributor handled all the marketing initiatives. The distributor set up a retail store in Tianjin, so they actually had a physical retail store. And then the distributor also set up the e-commerce stores on 3 to 4 different platforms. In addition to that, the distributor was selling wholesale to a variety of different department stores that had pop-ups of the brand, and that was throughout China, okay? Now in 2018, the distributor, this American guy, he decided to retire. So he told my client, you have 2 choices. 1, you can change distributors, or 2, you can go out on your own. Okay, so my client definitely went through the phase of saying, okay, you know, what are the pros and cons of changing distributors? What are the pros and cons of doing it on our own? Anyway, lo and behold, they went out and did it on their own. So they created their own entity. They kept it in Tianjin for the main reason that they were able to take 2 of the staff from the distributor who were working solely on their brand. And because they were living in Tianjin, they decided to set up in Tianjin to keep these 2 staff members. They set up a new retail shop under their company. They had the freedom at that point to choose what malls. They did an analysis on that. And they took over all the rights of e-commerce stores. Now, this is a beautiful story because there were no real relationship hiccups. The issue was just the distributor went into retirement. There was no bad faith. The distributor was even kind enough to say, take your time. I have sort of a deadline in mind when I want to shut my own company, but take your time to do the whole transfer process. Fantastic. Okay, it doesn't happen every day. This is really a dream story. The pity is obviously that COVID kind of hurt their budget this year in terms of sales and the retail shop and whatnot. But they're still going, and they're going strong for the second half of the year. And this is the decision. This is just a live case study that's occurring right now, the story that happened to them and the decision that they went to go out on their own. And this is the story where they had a distributor that they outsourced everything to, okay? So you have a lot of options available to you in terms of how you wanna create your story for China. What direction do you wanna go to? Okay, this whole webinar has given you all the structural options. It's just a matter of you deciding what you wanna do in-house and what you wanna outsource completely, okay? And what is available for you today. Think about 3 points, which I think are really 3 big points. What is your liability? How much flexibility do you have in the structure that you choose? And deciding on the structure that you have, do you have real marketability? Cross-border e-commerce is only successful if you put in a marketing budget. Otherwise, it's honestly useless. I have had a lot of clients who have approached me that have utilized Tmall Global, which is based in Hong Kong. So it's not Tmall China, it's Tmall Global based in Hong Kong, where you don't have to have a Chinese entity to register a shop on them. But I think almost everyone I've spoken to that has taken that route has been unsuccessful. And the conclusion from my side is because they didn't spend enough time on the marketing capabilities that they had to do to get people from Tmall China onto the Tmall Global platform to search for their brand. Okay, so you've got to make the effort in all aspects. You've got to know your liabilities, how flexible is everything, and what is the marketability. Now, my main thing is, I guess, or the way to conclude how to choose the journey you want to go on, is that if today your goal is to generate revenue and to have your own trading license and to have full control over your business, you need to do it directly in China and have your own setup in China. If you are in a phase of your journey where you're just looking to test the market, you're researching it, you're trying to understand that through marketing campaigns that you can outsource to a marketeer, or where you can outsource everything to third parties and individuals, and revenue doesn't have to be generated locally, then you can do it from home. Okay, so think about what your ultimate goals are in all of this. Okay, so how can I help you to create your e-commerce business model? Okay, like I said, I've given you a lot of information today, which is probably extremely overwhelming. It is always case specific. So let me advise you, let me help you, let me educate you. There are no strings attached. We can have a conversation and brainstorm, okay? I can then help to implement your business model on the ground or from overseas. I can introduce you to my own network ecosystem of people that might be able to help you. The goal ultimately for me with every single client is to make sure that there is a protection system and operational guidelines in place, okay? And what I love to do is always check in with people, because ultimately the biggest milestone for you in China will be growth. You will always want to grow. So having someone to give you a certain level of accountability and to check up on you is a big thing. So if you want to set up a call, in the chat box, I'm going to put this link which goes directly into my diary, and you can set up an appointment directly with me. Alternatively, you can connect with me on WeChat. So WeChat, my ID, I'm going to put here as well. You can email me also. I'm going to give you my personal email address. And alternatively, if you want to look me up on LinkedIn and chat with me on LinkedIn, you can do so as well. You just have to look up for this name, okay? Just note that my colleague Joe will be reaching out to you next week as well, so that you have time to digest the webinar series and all of the information. Joe will reach out, give you a call, ask for your feedback on the webinar series, if there was anything to improve or amend, or it was all just fantastic. And he, if you want to use that opportunity to set up a call with me, you can do that as well. So let's move on to the question section. And let me check what questions have popped in. Okay, let me go through one by one. Okay, so Emma, unfortunately, Emma has already left, but Emma was asking, could I advise suppliers of marketing companies for e-commerce in China via email? I would be happy to advise people on marketing agencies. I actually know 4 or 5 marketing agencies in the UK that are specific to China. But Emma, if you are going to listen to this later on today, I just want to highlight one thing. Join tomorrow's session, because ultimately you could outsource everything through the Elanders Group and their partners and have everything tied in together. So join in for tomorrow's session if you want that as well. Robin's asking, can we get a copy of these lists? I don't know what these lists are. Are you talking about the positive list, Robin? If you are, go into Google, go into the search function, type in China positive list for e-commerce and see what pops up. Simple way that you could do something you could do right now. Emma was also asking, what is the value of the package at which point VAT is applied? VAT is not applied if the value of the package is under 50 renminbi, Emma. Okay. Jack was asking, using direct shipping model, if a customer returns a product to the supplier, maybe the product is faulty, can the customer get the tax refund? In theory, yes, they can, Jack. But again, this is something that will be consolidated with the e-commerce provider, who will handle all of the return functions, and then handle also, because it could have been that they also paid customs duty, because it might have been one of those spot checks. So the product has to be shipped out of China in order to get customs duty if it was applicable from the start, and the VAT. Paul was asking, who are the best contacts to talk to regarding allowed ingredients that can be put in a beverage exported to China? That's a very specific question, Paul. The best, are you referring to the positive list? If you are referring to the positive list, then just look for the beverage item and see if it's available. I don't know what you're referring to in terms of allowed ingredients. If you can give me more details on that, I'll be happy to answer you. Question, can Shopify be used in China? I cannot answer you, Elena. I'm not an expert in that field. I don't know everything. That's something you might want to ask in tomorrow's session. Robin was asking, okay, this is just for everybody. If you haven't registered for the other webinars, register for them, because then you will get an email with a copy of the presentation together with the link to the webinars. So continue to register for them. Even if you can't come, you'll get those emails with all of the details inside. Paul's asking, we need a customs contact regarding specific ingredients that we're using in our beverage. That's very difficult to get, Paul, because it depends at which port the products are going to arrive, and to have a specific customs contact that will know exactly this information. What you can also do is type into Google, China Customs Bureau. You will get their website, and there might be a helpline available to reach out to them. Alternatively, join tomorrow's session and you can bring up this question to the Elanders Group, who handle everything in terms of logistics and warehousing. And they also then handle all the customs procedures. They might not know exactly this question, but at least you'll have a contact to a logistics provider that might know a customs official that will be able to reach out. So definitely join in tomorrow's session. But you can also look on the Customs Bureau website, Paul, because they do have an English version. So you can use that as just a research point to see if anything pops up between now and tomorrow's webinar session. I'm out of breath. That was a long session today. I hope that I've answered everyone's questions. If anything else is popping in, let me know. Otherwise, I'll just continue. Again, if you want to set up a call, message me. Otherwise, don't forget, 3 more sessions this week. If you're unable to join these 3 sessions, just remember, register for them. go to woodburnglobal.com/events, and you'll still get the recording link as well as a copy of the presentation. So go ahead and do that. Otherwise, I will leave you there. Tomorrow is going to be a very exciting session with both Kevin and Alan from the Alanders Group, who will be talking about really the ins and outs of cross-border e-commerce. So really, if you joined the June webinar series, you'll know what their presentations are like. It goes really in step-by-step formats. It's fantastic. So definitely come in, listen in on that. Just so you understand the difference between Wednesday and Thursday session. Wednesday is going to be looking at suppliers overseas and doing the direct shipping or bonded shipping model into China. Domestic e-commerce is if you are producing in China and you don't want to spend money to send your product out to then re-import it. Domestic e-commerce is all about you're producing in China, you want to sell in China, and how can you create that logistical and warehousing solution to be able to keep the product in China. And then on Friday, like I said, do your homework, right? Figure out what you're going to do in-house and outsource. And if you are looking to find the right people internally within your organization, you'll want to talk to or listen in on Manfred's presentation about how you can find the right people, okay? Thank you all very much for joining in. And I hope to see you at the rest of the sessions this week. I hope it was helpful. If you've got any feedback whatsoever, I'm happy to receive them. Have a great afternoon, great evening. Thank you and goodbye.